Good morning, everybody. Getting started once again, and we're here with our Sunday sermon early for the sunrise Sunday sermon. And so, thank you again for joining us. It is another Sunday, another time for us to get in here and experience what God has to share with us. And when we do this today, we're going to do this looking at friendship and faith. Excuse me. And we're looking at David and Jonathan, a brotherhood knit at the heart. David and Jonathan, a brotherhood knit at the heart. And so let me go ahead and start with our text. Our text is going to come from 1 Samuel chapter 18. It's going to cover a few verses. 1 Samuel chapter 18. It'll cover verses 3 and 4 to kind of give us an introduction to the relationship between David and Samuel. The relationship between David and Samuel. Just a hint of it, if I could say it like that. Here we go. 1 Samuel chapter 18, verse 3 and 4. Then Jonathan and David made a covenant because he loved him as his own soul. And Jonathan took off the robe that was on him and gave it to David with his armor, even to his sword and his bow and his belt. 1 Samuel 18, verses 3 and 4. That's the New King James Version. This text gives us David and Jonathan, with Jonathan in the lead. So as we read it from a Hebrew perspective, the main subject is not David. It is Jonathan, because Jonathan is in the lead, right? It's much like when we read about Miriam and Aaron. Miriam assumes the lead because of her position in the text, right? And so who gets punished for talking crazy about Moses? Miriam, right? And so when we read Jonathan and David made a covenant because he loved him as his own soul, that's because Jonathan loved David as his own soul. Make sense? Hope it hits somebody right in their heart where it needs to. So that's the text. And the text tells us that David and Jonathan were knit together by this covenant. They were knit together by this covenant, and this covenant is what bound them, right? As friends, as more than friends, as brothers, as two households connected for ages, right? And so this gets us to what a covenant is. And let me share this with you real quick, right? A covenant. This is a formal, sacred, dynastic, right? Talking about dynasties, agreement known in Hebrew as a berith. It's a covenant. It's known in Hebrew as a berith. In some instances in Hebrew, it is known as a brit, right? A beret, right? There are different names for it, but the covenant has that name, right? And that name is to solidify the agreement and what should come out of it. And you'll see it in different places, but in English, it's usually always presented as a covenant or a vow. But in Hebrew or the Aramaic, it may be presented in one of these forms, just so you know. And that's to help us understand that this was not just by happenstance. This wasn't just, oh yeah, man, we cool. This was an agreement, a vow that these men had made to one another that interwove them generationally, that we'll see going forward. Hope you get that. So that's the text. Voila. Now, let's get into this teaching some more. All right? So the text shows us that. And we can see here that the teaching extends beyond just chapter 18. It goes across 3 chapters in their dealings, and we'll see that as we go forward. So this particular text in 1 Samuel 18 deals with the complication of David and Jonathan's relationship, the complexity of it, because Jonathan was Saul's son, meaning he was also Michael's brother. And David was a subject of Saul the king, but he was also a servant and a soldier for the king, right? And so he wasn't just there as somebody under the king's authority. He was a very personal servant of the king, and the king would not let David go home at this point. For whatever reason, for whatever was going on in his heart, the king decided David was not going to go home. And there were some things going on that troubled David about that. But in the midst of that, we see this transition of going from the relationship that David and Saul have to the relationship that was built between David and Saul's son, Jonathan. And so Jonathan, it says clearly in verse 3, along with David, made a covenant, right? Because there was this love for each other, right? And we got to look at the friendship of these two and how it was confirmed by this covenant with a vow before the Lord from house to house. Look at this. Jonathan took off what were royal garments and put them on David. Jonathan, who was not any type of slouch as a soldier, put his armor on David, and even his sword and his bow down to his belt. That meant that Jonathan was unguarded in dropping everything he had and putting it on to David. That's a friend. That's a brother in arms. That's a brother indeed. And so he did that and did that to share with David and to show David where he stood. Now look at this. All the way to verse 20, 16. It says, so Jonathan made a covenant with the house of David. David doesn't have a house except by his entering into the relationship with Michal, his wife, given to him by Saul, who happens to be Jonathan's sister. That's the first one. She doesn't bear him a child, right? She's barren. But yet and still David has this authority now as being married into royalty. And so Jonathan, this is the complexity of it. Jonathan is not only David's fellow warrior, right? Jonathan was excellent with the bow, it was said. But Jonathan is also David's brother-in-law. Keep up now. Keep up now. Jonathan is David's brother-in-law, and David and Jonathan have a bond that's beyond just friends, right? And so keep on. We're still digging into this. And so remember, they make this covenant, right? They make this covenant that says they're connected to each other's house. They make this covenant, that even though Jonathan, by lineage, should be the next king, he tells David in First Samuel 23:17. Unbelievable, totally selfless. He tells David, hey man, you're going to be king and I'm going to be second to you. Unbelievable. Check it out. Right? That David is not jealous. That Saul's son, Jonathan, is not jealous of David in any degree and is apparently rooting for him to come out on the other side as king of Israel. And the chance that once David became king, Jonathan desired David, being kind and favorable to his family, those that came on after him once he became king, that he didn't forget the covenant he had with Jonathan and that they was not lost in all that it wasn't forgotten. And that's all right there for us to look at. And I want us to take this into consideration. What David and Jonathan had was a covenant, and that covenant did three basic things. Number one, it confirmed both men as friends. It confirmed what already existed between them. It confirmed both of them as friends. And in 1 Samuel 18:3, we see that shown by the love that Jonathan has for David in his own soul. So much love that in verse 4, he strips himself of his royal princely garments. He strips himself of his armor and all those things that he is known for, and he hands them to David. He puts them under David's command. So, number one, it confirmed both men as friends. Number two, it connected both men like family. 1 Samuel 20:16. So Jonathan made a covenant with the house of David. This is going into the future. This is going into the future that David would somehow become king, and Jonathan made a covenant with him as far as him becoming king. Like, hey, look, I know how the system is set up, and the system is set up that I would be the king next as the prince right now, and my daddy being the king right now. But I know that God has laid his hand on you, and you're destined to be the king right after my dad. Only thing I'm asking, God help us. Look out for my family, right? That's what a friend does, right? Pardon me for having a moment, but that's what a friend does. A friend looks out for your family. A friend will keep in mind the bond and covenant that you have, and the friend will push forth and go with the constant reminder that you've been there for each other, and yet you vowed to be there for each other in the future. And finally, in 2 Samuel 9, right? 2 Samuel 9, and this is important. We see this as something way out there, 2 Samuel 9, and what it really is it's saying, hey, look, this is the covenant between David and Jonathan, and this is the opportunity where David said, is there someone from the house of Jonathan that I can bless? Right? Looking for an opportunity to fulfill this commitment, because look, this covenant committed both men to each other and their households forever. And that meant also into the future. So it may not have been much when they were coming up with it together, but it may have been much when they were separated and Saul was gone and Jonathan was gone, and David looked around in 2 Samuel chapter 9 and said, is there anyone I could bless? Is there anyone remaining from the household of David, from the household of Jonathan, that I can bless? That's what that covenant was about. That's what that was about. And so when we talk about faith and friendship, true and genuine friendship isn't about, can we talk about it? It isn't about what someone can do for you or what someone has done for you. True and genuine friendship is about how someone makes you feel, how someone is there for you. You know, there's a difference. And real friendship says that this person of faith has been there for you. So you ought to take a moment and just thank God for a friend like that. Can you commit to a friend like that to the end? I hope you can. I hope you're able to. I hope you're able to see the blessing. Amen. Amen. And amen. God bless. Stay. Amen.